Oh, hell yes. Oh, hell yes. Oh, man, that couldn't have gone any better the way I kind of sort of hoped it would without even realizing this was how they were going to stack things up together and how it was going to play out. Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, talking about episode 10, Sakurada Reset, and Sumire is back. Sumire is back. And I never would have guessed this was the way they were going to pull this off. It's so exciting to me. It's flabbergasting, it's gobsmacking, it's awesome. It's like, I love that they took established properties that they have been dealing with and doling out since day one. They took everything that was established and they exploited it. They used it to make this come about. There was no time travel. There was no, being able to bend reality. Any of these kinds of things, quantum leaping or otherwise, using a device, to travel through time. They used everything that had been built up to this moment. Sasano's picture of Sumire, where she's holding out that MacGuffin, she knew in that moment, when that very picture was captured, what her fate would be, her dual fates, which is mind-blowing. Being able to sense the future, being able to know that some part of herself would have to die to propel things forward in such a fashion. Sacrificing herself, but giving herself a new lease on life out of it, just blows my ever-loving mind. Murase, who began as somewhat of an antagonist, now having been thoroughly won over to Kei and Haruki's side and everything like that, they utilize her ability to blank out the ability of any other ability user for her entire body, so that when they enter a portrait as taken by Sasano during a winter blossom season, they are able to take a flower petal out, a winter blossom petal out. And because they've reset within the picture and they've gone back outside of it, suddenly the ramifications of Sasano's ability is null and void. So that petal can last naturally as it would for the rest of its time. It will not disappear after that 10 to 15 minutes. That entire pocket universe captured within that portrait would also fade away. The petal's fine. They took the petal out of the portrait. Stands to reason. I was gobsmacked. I'm like, oh, hell yes. You're going to go into that picture. You're going to have, and I hadn't quite worked out how it was going to happen. I'm like, you're going to have Murase, hug her or something like that. I didn't exactly know. I had forgotten completely about the dude who, he puts his hands on one and then the other and can transfer the abilities that way and such like that, as they did when things really, it goes back to square one. When things began, we had those earliest memory transferences between Kei and Haruki with this guy as the mediator. And so that's what they do. They use him. They go back to that lakeside, that shore side, where that picture was captured. And there is the mediator, there is Murase, there is Haruki, there is Kei, and they've all entered this together. All of their abilities are necessitated in order to pull this off. But it's all stuff that has been established from the get-go. There's nothing new suddenly being introduced at this juncture. It's everything we've had in play, established since the beginning. And the coming together, the puzzle pieces being fitted together, allow for the mediator to stand between Murase and Sumire, captured within the photograph. She already knew this was coming. He places his hands on them. She does her full body ability to allow for her not to be affected. The reset occurs, and Sumire is brought out. She is living, breathing, vital all over again. And it's just gobsmacking. And I love how, once again, it goes back on that swamp man tale, that sort of, Star Trek dilemma of the transporters is the person who goes in the same as the person who comes out. And that's really kind of the clinchpin dilemma. By the end of the episode, there is some dialogue to suggest there's always the possibility, like that little girl Mari, that this Sumire is just sort of a duplicate, is her own version of a similar but not the same being. And I like how there is that, that sort of hanging in the air of which is it? Which will it be? She has a message from 2 years hence she's supposed to receive if she is the genuine. Now, she claims she received the message, which should solidify that this is the original Sumire, not a duplicate. But because we, the viewer, aren't privy to that, Kay is not privy to that, only this Sumire experiences or has a lack of experiencing it, we got to just take her at her word, And she leaves things off with the question of, well, which one would you rather beg the question of, speak to? Were you harboring a want to reconnect with the original, or is this satisfactory if I'm a new Sumire? That kind of thing. And again, I was so excited. As soon as I understood what they were doing, going into the picture of the Winter Blossom tree in full bloom, and they managed to take out that petal. I got it. I understood in the minute they did it. And I was like, oh, crap. Sumire, this is how they're going to do it. There's not going to be any sort of new fandangled rigmarole that doesn't make any sense that we're going to be left questioning for episodes at a time. No. This was pinioned, based in the reality of the series from the word go. Everything we have had exposed to us was utilized and came to a head in this moment to bring her back. Or at least some estimate of her. And from here on out, as a result of that, we know there's going to be trouble, perchance, sad tidings, but there is the relief, the wonder of their recapturing her life and bringing it back out of the bottle like so much lightning. It totally, thoroughly excited me. I was on the edge of my seat. Calling back, in fact, on Kei's first experience with the reset, going back to when he and Haruki were children, to see that this was somewhat the solidification of his choice to move to Sakurada, that he was, for all intents and purposes, kind of sort of threatened or bribed, arguably, that his past be forgotten, that his family no longer remember they even had him in their lives and all these things. This was something answering to his own want. It was pitch perfect for him, and he could finally break that leg off, so to speak, without any sort of qualms by that point. Having experienced that reset, after having been approached by the Bureau and they're coming to him with this deal, he knew all of what was in store for him, and it gave him a better gauging of the ramifications of such a choice. Even that early on, even in his debuted, sort of introduction to Sakurada and people with abilities, which he was fascinated by. But that fascination, he began to realize that because of his memory recall abilities, chances were he could leave Sakurada, unlike everyone else who would forget. And that's why this place is little known to the world, if known at all, for its abilities and such like that, because nobody can retain the memory of having been there. Whether they migrated there and migrated back out again, whether they were born there, people's memories fade of their abilities, their brains sort of, realigns the timeline and the memories over that, edits around it, and does it in such a fashion, probably processing even through dreams, REM state dreams and things of that sort, to make these fanciful memories just fade away, become uncertain, become so much imagination, so that there's never a question. outside of Sakurada. What's going on with that place? And whether or not his memory recall ability is actually a legitimate threat, it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter if, he'll leave Sakurada and that ability will fade away or not. They don't want to take the risk. And as long as he's here and they give him a relatively comfortable life, a life comfortable enough to not really sort of try to rebel against the, air quotes, system, the Bureau's system, well, then they can exploit him too, just in a similar fashion to the witch. The witch they actually clamped down on and confined. And it took, Kei and Haruki's and Murase's and Sasano's intervention to break her free for the last week of her life so she could reconnect with Sasano, her lover. But arguably so, it's still as much a prison to Kei, even if he is free to move around. He's never going to be free enough to leave Sakurada anymore. But he doesn't care, because as long as he's there, he can manipulate things and live freely enough, use these abilities of these abilities users to his own devices. I mean, for the most part, he's working in tandem with the Bureau, but that's only so long as it suits him, And in a way, that telltale idea of the MacGuffin answers to that. The MacGuffin very much was that pinpointed item, that pinpointed thing that began all of this, that propelled it through the use of Sumire, creating this wondrous fantasy of the MacGuffin being something that would allow someone who was in possession of it to control and command all powers within Sakurada. That's all nonsense. But at the same time, there's truth to it, because it isn't a device. It isn't a thing that exists that will propel that and bring that about, but rather, did it exist at the center of the culmination of all these different ability users who would come together for the purpose of saving Sumire? So there is truth to it. There is a level of Kei was in possession of this thing, and through his possession of it, he got Murase, he got the mediator guy, he got Haruki, he got all these people together. He commanded their abilities to his own ends. And his own ends were saving Sumire. But this was something she set up from the get-go. She understood from the get-go she would have to die, and some essence of her would live on. All of this stuff was in the pre-planning. And I like how they call back, once again, on the aspect of which one of them is the android. Well, it's not, in fact, Haruki, like is the immediate knee-jerk assumption. It was Sumire, because so much of her life was pre-programmed, inalterable, no matter what. And she could only really so far go through the motions until finally taking her life. And now that she is reborn, born anew, whether in a new guise or a continuation of that original Sumire, no matter which of those cases she is, this new Sumire will continue on where the other left off, with all of the good and bad tidings in tow. And just seeing how they brought that about. How they managed to fall back on all these pre-established designs and abilities and powers and such like that. Wow. I was just so excited by the end. And I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of this particular episode of Sakurada Reset, if you've seen it as well, episode 10. Were you gobsmacked? Were you just flabbergasted at the awesome sauce of bringing Sumire back in this such a way? Could you have ever predicted this was how they might accomplish this? Did you have speculative, hypotheses in the works as to how they might bring this about? Or were you completely blindsided with the obvious, as I was, that in fact this was how it would all shake down? And but I was pleasantly surprised. I had never put the pieces together quite in this such a way. I didn't really, realize for myself how they could put the abilities that we were aware of together in this such a fashion to pull this off. It was just beyond my perception. And as soon as I realized it, as soon as I saw what they were doing, I was just excited like a schoolboy. You know, so let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Love it or hate it, anything goes, as long as we have a great conversation. And yeah, can't wait to see where we go from here. It looks like the next episode is going to be sort of a Haruki, like, I don't know, psychological examination or something. She seems a little loopy and a little overly obsessive based on the PV for the next episode. So it'll be interesting to see what's going on there. And yeah, otherwise it'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.